Hello again. Today, I want to talk about respect. Now, I I hesitate to enter into this subject. I know I have to, but my hesitation springs from the fact that, as I said before, so much of what I have to talk about overlaps with other things that I have to talk about, and different concepts and principles are tied in with one another, and so it's hard to find where to begin. And I especially wanted to talk about thinking principally before I presented any principled thinking. But I really need to get ahead of something. Assuming that anybody listens to what I say, and some handful of people are. Uh, there's a real danger of someone hearing what I say, recognizing that it's true, and then looking at the authorities in their life and the people in their life who are worthy of respect as far as God is concerned, and deciding that they're not worthy of respect because they don't match up to what they know to be true, and they even though what they know to be true is true, they then may handle that situation badly. And so I want to get ahead of damage that could be done by having just enough understanding to make a mess of things. Respect is really, really, really important to God. So that's what this video is going to be about. We're going to talk about respect. But before we get there, I do also want to address something really quick. I'm going to be presenting true. I'm going to be presenting the truth, various different truths, and I'm not. It's simply not possible for, at least right now, for me to uh, provide exhaustive proof of what I'm saying, of the verity of what I'm saying. And as I go, I'm going to go back around and I'm going to explain things in more detail, and we'll go into various different points, in great depth. Uh, but uh, at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit down and engage with people who want to argue with me. I mean, I could do that if case by case, if I find, if I'm inclined, if I find it productive, or even if I just feel like it, I may argue with somebody in a particular instance. But at the end of the day, I'm really tired of that. The fact is, I do not owe you an argument which satisfies you. And really take that to heart. That's really useful. I think a lot of us feel pinned down as though we can't claim anything to be true unless we have an argument for the truthfulness of that claim, which satisfies its detractors. You do not owe anyone an argument which satisfies them. Leonard Ravenhill said it this way: a man with an experience is never at the mercy of a man with an argument. You encounter God. If He shows you by His Holy Spirit that something is true, you had an experience there. And even if you can't defend it to anyone else, uh, you're not at that mercy. You're not at their mercy. I kind of want to go off in all kinds of different directions. When I went to Christian college for 5 semesters, and while I was there, early on when I first began attending, I was a young Christian, and I'm going to talk about this again, but I encountered a lot of questions from theology teachers in theology, religious teachers in a Christian institution. And these were questions that undermined, or at least attempted to undermine, my faith. And these professors, and I really do want to get into this, it's a different subject, but the fact is that even though I couldn't give them an answer, and they were really disillusioning a lot of the young Christians who were my classmates, I went out into the woods at night and I wept before God. And I said, I don't know how to answer these questions, but I know that you're true. I know that your word is true. I can trust you. Even if I can't defend you, I can trust you. So take that to heart. You don't owe anyone an argument that satisfies them, because people who don't want to believe a particular truth, that they have an inexhaustible resource for arguing against that truth. You'll never get to the bottom of arguing with them. I actually had that happen. I was arguing back and forth with a cessationist, and he actually argued that my experience in being saved, Jesus stopping me from killing myself and bringing me to yield to him, saving me, making me a Christian, and then leading me ever after. His argument that he brought to bear was, in essence, that was all demonic. And it was demons trying to trick you into interacting with them as though they're God, so that you could think that you're saved, so that you could go and spread this false teaching. That is as close to, and it makes me feel horrible even articulating the argument, that is as close to anyone blaspheming the Holy Spirit as I've ever come to seeing. Yeah. And so we had a back and forth where at one point he sent me, it was on Facebook, and for ease of interacting with his argument, I would copy it all and paste it onto a Word document. And one missive that he sent me was 14 pages long. And then I sent an equal reply addressing each of his points. And we were going back and forth like that. And I was starting to get weary. And I finally said so. And he essentially said, I could keep doing this forever. And I was like, well, then we're done. I realized there was not going to be an end of arguing. All that to say, I'm not doing that. I'm teaching. I'm proclaiming. Okay, so let's get into respect. What is respect? Well, let's talk about what it isn't first. God gave me his definition. He gave me the definition of respect. I wasn't looking for it. I'm going to two different directions at the same time. Okay, what is respect not? There is a when the word is used in our context, in our culture, in general, people don't actually know what they mean. They tend to mean approval. I like that person. They're doing and saying things of which I approve. And so they get my respect, as it were. That's not respect. And so you will likely find yourself in all kinds of situations where somebody either verbalizes or indicates, or you can determine that they believe that their position is essentially, if you do X, Y, and Z, you will have my respect, and if you do these other options, you will not have my respect. If you do that, I'll lose respect for you. If you do that, I will respect you more. That's not respect. And so what inescapably happens is if you comply, if you do the things that they want to do, particularly if that incentive of their respect is this carrot on the end of the stick that actually motivates you, and they discern that you want this thing that they call respect from them, what happens, whether they recognize it or not, is that they actually respect you less. So, and it's inescapable. It's inherent to what respect is, that if you do those things at that hostage negotiation, you've actually conveyed to them that you're worth less respect by giving in to their demands when they, make that exchange. So, inescapably, the opposite happens, and you'll see this a lot in a relationship where you have, like, to say that you have a man and he's married to a woman and she doesn't respect him. Her respect becomes this thing that she wants him to earn, and every attempt that he makes at earning it takes it further away from him, and she respects him less and less and less. So that's a real good example that you'll see in real life. It's just everywhere. Okay. Respect is not approval. So what is respect? Well, let's look at an example on a visceral level of what from past times in our culture that you would see respect sort of acted out as a sort of caricature. You see these two Japanese warlords. Like there's stories like this in our culture. You have two warring Japanese warlords. They're at odds with one another. They're rivals. They're arch nemeses, and they hate each other. But these are men of honor, and all honor is respect in action. So they're men of honor. And so they insist on honor, and it doesn't matter whether they like it or not. It doesn't matter whether they like the other person or not. They insist on it. And so then you have Warlord A, and when one of his peasants comes in and gives him some information about Warlord B, your enemy, he was lying, and he said, he said these lies. Warlord A knows Warlord B's character. He doesn't like him, but he knows he refuses to lie. He knows that the other man is a man of honor. It has nothing to do with the fact that he hates him. He just knows about him. And so he will be mad at the servant, the peasant, for behaving in a dishonorable way and smearing his enemy. So that's what it is acted out. So it was a bit over a year ago, and I wasn't looking for the definition, I think, as I said. And God just sort of broke into my thoughts and injected it. He just told me, this is what respect is, and it just turned my world upside down. I wish I had had the definition when I was a boy, because it's definitely important for boys to learn what respect is. It would have changed my life. Respect is merely the acknowledgement of three things. Three different categories. One is ability, mental, physical, what have you. Ability. You have to acknowledge ability where it's present. You don't get to inflate it, whether it's your ability or somebody else's ability. You just acknowledge it. You don't get to depreciate it. You don't get to pretend that it's less than it is. Doing either of those things is dishonorable. It's not respect. Just acknowledge any ability as it is. So ability is one, character is another, and the same thing. You don't inflate it, you don't depreciate it, you just acknowledge what's there. And then the third one, and this one is the hardest for people to grab hold of, is position. So you have ability, you have character, and you have position. Respect is just acknowledging what is there with all three of those things, whether you like the person or not. That's what respect is. So you see that when one person holds supposed respect out as this bribe for another person to comply with their desires and demands, and then that person complies, what is communicated to the person doing the manipulating is that that person is worthy of less respect than I actually thought, because I have power over them. You see? So that person, whether they think this way or not, their heart recognizes something that's true of the other person, and it is that this person can control them. Whereas if the other person says, no, I'm not doing that, regardless of whether that person hates that response, their heart learns, I can't control that person. So as far as ability goes, this is the easiest one to recognize because it's natural. It's just out there in the world, and it's not always like mental ability. Not so much. It's a bit more subtle, especially certain types of non-physical ability. But still, as far as ability, like there's in general manifestly observable symptoms of ability, which you can, in order to refuse to respect ability, you have to function less well in the world. If I want to pretend to myself, let's say that I'm a lumberjack, and I want to view myself as the best lumberjack, and there are other lumberjacks who fell way many more trees than I do, and they do a way better job. I have to lie to myself in order to not respect them, in order to not recognize where they are and where I am. I have to lie to myself. And lying to yourself, you start operating in ways that are not in tune with reality. So it's a lot harder to do that in the natural than it is with character. And it's, and character is, it's harder to do it with character than it is with position. And I want to focus on position. Position is very important to God. So, but before we get there, it's just really, really super important, guys, for you to insist on being honest with yourselves and with everyone else and with God. You have to, and I'm going to say this again, but I want to say it here. If you want to gain any benefit from what I have to say, you have to make up your mind to do something like this. Go to God and say, Father, I want to know the truth, no matter how it makes me feel. I want you to plunge the truth like a dagger into my heart up to the hilt. That's what you've got to do. You've got to do it. All right, so let's talk about position. There's a really excellent television miniseries that was made about Easy Company during World War II, in particular, from D-Day through the Battle of the Bulge till the end of the war. So, like that's the story you're following, and it's an excellent miniseries. Uh, I only remember one scene that you would want to skip from one of the episodes. But there is this early on, they do there's one episode which is about their boot camp training, and you have Sobel, who is over Easy Company. I don't remember his rank, captain, I think. And then you have his second in command, Winters. And through the course, this bit of spoilers, through the course of their boot camp, it becomes evident that Sobel is not only mean, like nasty, but he's also incompetent. So here we have two aspects of respect. He has negligible ability, so we can't respect him for any ability that he doesn't have. And he has negligible character, so we can't respect him for, any character that he doesn't have. But he has this position. Well, he ends up losing, again, this is spoilers, he ends up losing command of Easy Company. He's moved to a different position somewhere else. His second in command, Winters, takes his place. Fast forward, Winters has been through the D-Day, the invasion, and everything that followed, all through all kinds of harrowing brutality, and he gets promoted. So he's eventually higher than a captain. I don't remember what he was, and then he encounters Sobel again. Sobel is still a captain. And so Sobel sees him, and it rankles him that his second in command now outranks him. And so he's walking past him, and he just pretends not to see him. No, he says something. Winters greets him, and he says something back to him, like, Winters, and he doesn't salute him. So Winters calls him back, and he says this amazing quote. He says, "We salute the rank, not the man. You have to give honor to the position. We give honor to whom honor is due, and people are due honor from their position. And it doesn't matter whether they're, they have character that you like. It doesn't matter whether they have ability that you like. If they have that position, you have to honor the position. And if you don't honor the position, you're doing wrong. You're undermining honor itself. You're undermining respect. And that means you're undermining that which commands that you should be respected." Recognize, I'm going to get Calvinist here, recognize that position is given by God. Yes, there's absolutely an Arminian, and I am going to talk about Calvinism and Arminianism. It's going to be fun. Real quick, I meant to say this at the beginning. Listen, guys, there is going to be something to offend everyone in what I have to say. It will be absolutely incredible if you get through all of the videos until I run out of things to say, if that ever happens. It'll be absolutely incredible if you get through all of them, understand them, and have not been offended once. That'll be amazing. It's highly unlikely. So there's going to be something to offend everybody. Anyway, so back to position. It's given by God. That's a fact. Even somehow, if there's human agency involved, because the human agency is involved. So let's look at the Pharisees. Pharisees are a great example of this. Jesus said of them that they have sat themselves in the seat of Moses. They did that. They're human agency. They chose to take upon themselves the seat of Moses. They're walking around as though they have the authority of Moses. What does Jesus say? Listen to them. You don't get to say, well, Joe Biden shouldn't be president. Like he shouldn't be president. You don't get to say, since I think he shouldn't be in that position, I don't have to honor him for that position. It's not so simple as that. There is a time where someone's behavior makes it necessary to remove them from a position, but it's highly likely that that's above your pay grade. And we're not going to get into that. We will talk about that later, I think, when we talk about the problem of authority. That's going to be a fun video. It really will. And you'll hear me mention the problem of authority, any number of times. I guess I'll give you a quick definition since I brought it up. The problem of authority addresses two linked issues. One is, how do I know that something is true? And the other is how do I know if a person has the right to tell me what to do? They're very, very, those two issues are very, very parallel to one another. What's another way of saying it? Sorry for the dead air. There's something that I want to say, and I'm trying to think of it. I can't think of it. Well, rather than dwell on it, that's the problem of authority in a nutshell. It's really bothering me. Okay, so as soon as you recognize that any position of authority, if a person is a king, he was made a king by God. If a nation has, a nation's borders were established by God. God's the one who makes alive and who makes dead. Like, he's the author of history. So, like, there's a real truth, Bible truth to God's sovereignty. But then you have man's agency. And so there's a paradox there. We need to talk about paradox. It's a necessary presupposition in order to have a theology that doesn't end up requiring you to pit your understanding of one Bible truth against another Bible truth. So again, we will cover that too, with presuppositions at least, and maybe we'll do a video on paradox itself. But for now, just recognize it's a paradox. Okay, so since authority and position are given by God, all power belongs to God. It follows then that if somebody is in a position of authority, that when we do not honor them for that position, we are refusing to honor God. And there is respect which is due specifically to position. And the word for that is dignity. Dignity is a special kind of respect which it's very dangerous. It's more dangerous to tread upon dignity than respect for ability or respect for character. For the very reason that position is given by God. So you are, for example, a human being. That is a position. And there is respect due you due to the fact that you're a human being, because you take the position of human, which if anyone violates or treads upon that specific respect, it's an indignity. It's a violation of dignity. This is why, by the way, we have laws against cruel and unusual punishment. You have today so many people. Let's talk about what are the worst kinds of people that you can think of. Pedophiles. Okay, so let's talk about pedophiles. We can talk about rapists, whatever. Pick your favorite villain. Nazis. Recently there was a man who killed a woman on a train. I haven't seen the video. I've seen the picture of him about to attack her. But people are pretty upset about it. Rightly so. Here's this monster. Yes, he's a monster. But he's a human being. We don't get to just set aside his dignity. I know. It's what we want to do. I'm sure that if I went online and I just found, a Facebook page commenting on this, you just see all the comments, or a YouTube video, see all the comments. There's all kinds of creative ways that people would come up with for causing this man suffering because they want vengeance, essentially. They want something horrible to happen to him. They want him to suffer. And I understand that. Listen, I understand that. I really do. But you can't violate principle. And I know I'm getting out of myself because we haven't talked about principle. You don't get to just tread upon a human being's dignity, even if he's Hitler, even if he's Stalin. It's not your call. And that's why we have those laws in place. You do not have the right to violate a person's dignity freely. I do, and maybe we can come back to it, but I do hold out a sort of fine print addressed to the potential for it being necessary to tread upon the dignity of a position under very particular circumstances, but it still must be done according to principle. At the end of the day, according to principle means God gave you permission. God said either directly, here's the rule, or here's the principle from my word, or by the leading of his Holy Spirit, and you better be right. In this case, you can tread upon that person's dignity in this particular way. And that, by the way, is how you have prophets go and rebuke kings in the Old Testament. That is how you have judges. That is why, and we're probably getting ahead of ourselves, but that's why Abigail was not wrong in violating the authority of her husband. We'll get there too, especially when we talk about authority. So you don't get to violate the dignity, the respect due to somebody inherent to their position, not for a human being, not for an adult or a child, not for a man or a woman, not for someone who is aged. That's completely lost in our day, and there's reasons for that. Not for a husband, not for a wife, not for friends, family, not for citizens, not for members of a shared entity, not for church or governmental authorities. I'll say it again. Undermining respect due to someone is undermining the respect due to God. If I am watching Peter's children and I I know I have to go somewhere and I get someone to watch them. It's never happened. I'm just making up a scenario. I get somebody to watch them, and then I leave, and and while I'm gone, one of his children does not show appropriate respect to the person who I picked to watch them. He's not respecting me. And God doesn't just choose people you like for positions. And I'm going to tell a personal story in a bit where I was in a position where there was somebody he chose in authority, and I didn't like the fact that that person had authority. A person who refuses to give right honor undermines the source of their own honor. If a person doesn't recognize an individual's position by refusing to recognize the authority which comes with it, they are treading upon the dignity of that position. Okay, so I'll give another illustration which I love. I love the one from Band of Brothers. There's there's a war movie called Gettysburg, and there's a really amazing illustration there. Actually, there's two. Uh, so at one point, if you know anything about Gettysburg, it was the turning of the tide in the Civil War in America. You had General Lee, the leader of the Southern Army, and there's this infamous battle called Pickett's Charge. It's it's in Pennsylvania. It's near Gettysburg, and there was these hills, and the Union Army they were entrenched up on the top of these hills, and there was this long field that the South had to run through, and then they had to run up these hills into a fortified position with, all kinds of cannons and everything. And so it was essentially a suicide mission. But Lee, who was not a dummy, by the way, people want to make Lee a dummy because they don't like him. He was not a dummy. And in his judgment, whether he was right or wrong, I don't know, but in his judgment, it was necessary that they beat the Union there then. And so they had no choice but to charge up that hill. And the general or the officer who led it, his name was Pickett, and it was called Pickett's Charge. And at one point, so Lee gives out his orders to the men under him, who were generals, and then those generals gave out their orders to their officers. And one of those generals, he was very close with this officer. They were friends, but this officer was beneath him. And I think the guy's name was Pickett. And he's telling him, this is the plan. And the man objects vehemently. He's not happy with this plan. He thinks it's a mistake. So here he is coming up against authority, coming up against the honor due to a person in position. Lee has the position of general of the Southern Army. I have to do what he says. That's the rule. If I acknowledge his position, I have to acknowledge that I have to obey him. But he thinks it's a wrong call. It's a lack in ability. And so he voices his objection to the order. And the man listens. And then he invokes his friendship by calling him by his first name. I don't remember what the guy's name was. Pretend it's Bill. I'm sure it wasn't. And he said, Bill, when you're ready, will you please take that hill? And then the man recognized the conversation was over. And so he said to him, I do this under protest. So he's like, I know this is wrong. We're going to lose. But then here's where respect comes in. Here's where honor comes in. Here's where a recognition of authority comes in. He went and did the best job that he possibly could. And I'll give another example from that same movie, just because I love it. Lee had this aide. It was this aide's job. The aide was like a lieutenant or something. Not he was an officer. He was highly educated. He was trained. He was good. He was a good officer. So he wasn't just some throwaway soldier. And it was this aide's job just to make sure that Lee had his hands free to do his job. So this guy made sure his laundry was done. He made sure his meals were prepared. He did all of his paperwork for him. And at one moment, Lee's, stumbling under the burden of the leadership position that he's, dealing with. And he looks at the aide, and the aide is doing all kinds of work. And Lee says to him, "That's too much work for you. I should get someone to help you." And he looks at him and he says, "General, I would be offended." He knew his position, and he knew the general's position. I'm on a dating website for all the good it'll do me, and there's any number of times I encounter this phrase, and as soon as I encounter it, I pass the profile by. Mutual respect. When women in particular, in our culture, use that term, what they mean inescapably is, I don't tell you what to do and you don't tell me what to do. It's an abuse of the term on the one hand, because they'll say that that's not what they mean. But it's a right use of the term on the other hand, because it is what they mean. What they mean is, I'm a strong, independent woman, and we're going to meet as peers. We're equals, and so nobody has authority over the other person. And I could probably go up on a rant about how when people insist on peers, we're peers, when they insist on that, nobody has authority over anybody else. Inescapably, what's also happening in their heart, whether they admit it or not, is that they think that if the playing field is equal so that nobody has a position over anyone else, they'll get their way. Either because they think, obviously, my way is self-evidently right, and so everyone will recognize that, or they think that they can get their way by hook and crook, manipulating behind the scenes, assassinating character, mentioning this suggestion to this person when, in just a subtle way, and just shifting things behind the scenes, and they'll get their way. One way or the other, they think that they're going to get their way, and that's why they want everyone to be peers. They need that even playing ground, and then they'll use their subtlety to get their way. That's what, in general, is going on there. Now let's talk about the heart of a man versus the heart of a woman. Because you'll note that Paul gives instruction to men and he gives instruction to women about husbands and wives. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church. That's a command. By the way, a command that doesn't hang upon the next exhortation. So even if the wife is not respecting the husband is not free from that command to love his wife. It's a standalone statement. But then when he talks to wives, he doesn't say, wives, love your husbands. And do men need love? Yes. But not as much as they need respect. Respect your husbands. Honor your husbands. The heart of a man is respect. It will kill a man faster if his wife doesn't respect him than if she respects him but doesn't love him. And no man is going to be able to thrive without divine intervention in a situation where someone near him, especially his own wife, doesn't respect him. So if you have a woman who wants her husband to be better than he is, the best thing she can do is respect him. If she insists on him being better in order to win her respect, he'll never get it. And that relationship will bitter and sour until it destroys until the relationship itself is dissolved, or one or both parties are utterly destroyed. That whole idea, if you want my respect, you have to earn it, is unbiblical. Now, if we're talking about ability and we're talking about character, then yeah, you have to earn that, meaning you have to show that ability in order for people to recognize it, to acknowledge it. Oh, I see that you are a good swimmer. Now I know the verity of that. I saw you in enough situations where lying would have been, at least in the short term, in your best interest, and you refused. So now I know this is an honest person. I respect you for that. I acknowledge that true thing about your character. Fine, in both cases. But as far as dignity goes, as far as respect due to position, you don't earn that. It belongs to the position. And if you refuse to give it to that position without explicit command or principle from Scripture, or a mandate by the Holy Spirit, and again, you'd better be right, you are sinning. This is evil. This is wicked. Whereas, so that's the heart of a man, is respect. And the heart of a woman is to be treasured. That's why that command is there. They're both parallel to each other right there. Man, your wives need this more than anything. They need you to love them. They need you to treasure them. If your wife doesn't feel like she is treasured to you, again, you're signing up for bad times. And it's the same thing. Women, if your husband doesn't feel like you honor him, like, this is my husband, he's worthy of respect because he's my husband, and this is a man, and he's worthy of respect because he's a man, and this is, a man, an adult, he's a human being, he's of this age, he's worthy of respect for these things. If he doesn't get that, it's going to be a bad time for everybody, for you, for your husband, for the kids. And a man respect is due to a man is due. A man owes his wife respect as well. It's not as though women don't have to love their husbands, and it's not as though men don't have to respect their wives. But again, respect is acknowledging what's there, what position is there, what ability is there, what character is there. You can't lie. If somebody is a liar, if somebody is a thief, if somebody has some kind of malformed character, and you pretend they're not, to them or to anyone else. That's not actually respect. What you're actually saying, and they know it in their heart, is that their character is so bad or their ability is so terrible that you have to violate your own character in order to pretend that their character or their ability is better than it is. So you're not doing them a favor. Like there's a sense in which they will begin to hate you for that. They'll lose respect for you. But you have to honor the position. And there's significant respect due to leadership. And the husband is a leadership position. All right. Husbands and wives. Respecting the wife as the weaker vessel. That's a command in Scripture too. It doesn't just say, hey, the woman is the weaker vessel. It's actually an exhortation. Hey, respect her as the weaker vessel. You have to acknowledge that your wife and the women in your life are not made to do what you are made to do. And so if you disparage them because they're not men, that is so stupid. I gotta say, it's dumb. Man, the patriarchal move, and I'm patriarchal, okay? I'm not egalitarian. I'm not complementarian. I'm definitely not feminist. I'm like, go patriarchy. I want to get a shirt that says go patriarchy. I'm going to come out with a t-shirt line. Like a lot of bad t-shirt ideas. It's really self-sabotage for the patriarchy folk to disparage with the position of women. I don't mean criticize individual women or women in particular groups of women, but disparaging the position of women. All women are careful. I mean, maybe all women are certain things. Like all women are female. So, okay, I'm not saying you can't necessarily make generalizations. But be careful. Because what you're doing when you disparage the position of woman, Andrew Tate is a great example of this, is you're actually making an argument, an appeal to the women who have any dignity to refuse to participate in your patriarchy. Because why? They're not going to be treasured. They need that. So if you don't treasure them, you're going to lose big picture. And so patriarchy folk, don't do that, okay? It's bad. It's a bad idea. Okay. Okay, we talked about Abigail, but let's talk about her again real quick. Just in case we didn't cover it appropriately. Let's see. So here you have a situation where there's this woman, and she's got this husband who is such a fool that it's actually his name. Nabal, I think, means fool. And David, he's a wealthy guy somehow. Maybe he's wealthy because of his wife. Who knows? But he's a wealthy guy, and he's got all these shepherds under him. And the shepherds are going out and doing their shepherd thing, watching the sheep. And David and his men, who happen to be in the area, fill the role of protector. It was understood in the culture that if you had men of the warrior vocation, and they were upstanding men, they weren't bandits, they would actually provide a service, and there would be a service in return. So they made sure that the people who were around them were safe, and the people who are around them would then take care of them. And so it was understood that when it was the time for reaping the reward for shepherding these sheep, that these soldiers would get a cut. It was understood. So Nabal, and when David sent his men saying, all right, it's time, we know you're shearing your sheep, so You know, we've been good to you. And Nabal responds, he's like, I don't know who this David is. He could be anybody. These are just rogues, brigands. So he refused to honor that practice. And it was going to get him and his household killed. And it was a wicked thing to do, and it was a foolish thing to do. And what he expected was his wife to honor his authority, and she didn't. So she actually tread upon his dignity. One caveat that I'll give right now for any authority whatsoever is that if you are commanded to sin, and suicide is a sin, so if you're participating in your own death or abuse, if you are commanded to sin, the authority commanding you to sin in this case, not entire, but in this case, has violated their own authority. They have undermined their own authority. And so in this case, you still have to give them respect, but it's along the lines in the military. It's written in, at least it used to be, I don't know if it still is, where it's understood when you're trained that there are certain orders that are unlawful orders that you then you're not allowed to follow them. Doesn't matter what your commanding officer says, and the response should be something along the lines of, I'm sorry, sir, I cannot obey that order. It's not you're not the boss of me now because I don't approve of the way that you're doing things. There's still respect there, still honoring the position. I'm sorry, that's a wrong order. I can't obey that one. And that's what she did. She recognized that his order was a wrong order, and it was a suicidal order, and so she rebelled. I hesitate to even call it rebellion. So there is a time to buck authority. I can recall 2 instances in my mind off the top of my head where you had a godly woman whose husband was an ungodly man. I saw this in person. And the husband was leading his household in a foolish way. But he wasn't necessarily commanding sin. Had I been able to counsel those women, I would have said, well, you have to honor your husband. You can't rebel against him simply because he's commanding you to do other than what you'd prefer or other than what you think is best. But in both cases, I think that the women went too far because they felt like it was a dishonor to even acknowledge that the man was wrong. And so honoring their husband and obeying their husband meant, from what I could tell as an outside observer, that they had to pretend that their husband was right. And that was wrong. Government officials. We talked about it. We're talking about it again real quick. Trump and Biden. God put them in those positions. I did not like Biden. I'm not a big Trump fan. I honor Trump just as I honored Biden for the position. And if they make a right call, good. Honor the right exercise of ability when it's present. Honor the right exercise of character, if you ever find it. But he's still the president. I'll actually give an example of something that I did that I shouldn't have done. When Kamala Harris was vice president, I came up with a pejorative nickname for her. It was wrong. I don't get to just speak evil of a leader of my people simply because that person doesn't meet my approval. We have to be very careful. I'm not saying that you can never. I'll just leave it at you have to be very careful. It's well, look at the example with Paul when he's before the Sanhedrin and the high priest orders him to be struck. He doesn't know that man's the high priest, and so he treats the man as though he's a peer. And all he says is, this is a natural response and it's a right response if they're peers. He says, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. He didn't do anything wrong if that man is his peer. But the other Jews around him, knowing that the man is the high priest, they're like, do you speak evil of the high priest? And he immediately backpedals. He says, whoa, I didn't know he was the high priest. No, I don't do that. And that man, and that's a trial about the truth, about his Christianity. And it's a trial for his life. And even in that circumstance, he honors. He gives honor where it's due to the position. Even though the man, his assessment of the man's character and what would happen to him was right. God did strike him. He was a whitewashed wall. Be careful. Don't just go around mouthing off about or to leaders, people in positions of authority. Another example from Scripture is the way that David and Saul interacted. Look at David. Look at his interaction with Saul. Saul was king, chosen by God, even though he turned out to be a wicked man. He was chosen by God. He was the Lord's anointed. Now, Saul's character failed and failed and failed until God said, I've rejected this man as king. And somebody from a modernistic way of thinking might then say, well, since God rejected him as king, he doesn't have the position anymore. But he did. He absolutely did, and David still honored it. And this man was trying to kill him. He tried to pin him to a wall with a spear on multiple occasions. This man was I don't know if he was demon-possessed or demonized, but he was tormented by demons. He failed in his character. He failed in his ability. God even told David, I have anointed you in his place. And David still insisted on principle. David's position was, God is going to deal with him. He made him the king, and he's going to unmake him. And it's not my place. And not only is it not my place, but I'm going to do everything I can to serve that man and to bless that man and love that man. All right, now let's talk about church leaders. And I'll tell you a story from my own experience. Years ago, I began attending a house church. And I had never met the pastor before. I only knew the one guy who had invited me. I was waiting tables. This guy was waiting tables and found out he was a Christian, and we got to talking, and he invited me to his house church. And I even liked the name of the church. It doesn't exist anymore, but the church was called Holy Fire Church. I was like, Holy Fire, right on. And so I went, and the day that I showed up, as I was stepping through the threshold, God yelled at me. I hadn't done anything. And God yelled at me. He's the pastor, not you. Whoa. Okay. And it turned out that man was a heretic. He loved, and I think this may be true of heretics in general, I don't know. But he didn't just love a particular heresy, because the moment he was disabused of it, he would go and find three more. So he loved heresy. Uh, and so here I am recognizing, attending the church for a while and then seeing this heresy and figuring out that it's heresy, and it took some doing. I still, as a member of that church, attending that church, had to honor him for the position. I had gone away to school, and I was gone for 2.5, 3 years. And when I came back, I started attending the church again. And the first time I walked through the door, God yelled at me again. He is the pastor, not you. He was hammering it home. I don't get to not give honor due to a position simply because the person does not meet my approval in some ways. And I was actually a prophet to that church for, I think, 3 years. And there were some really excruciating parts of that. It was to the point where every time I attended, I asked God, why am I here? It didn't matter. I still had to honor that man. There is, and even if, as a prophet, I have my own authority. God gave me a position, and with it comes authority. I have authority to speak the way that I'm speaking. Not everyone should speak this way. But no matter what, if I walk into a church without specific orders to buck the current chain of command, I observe the authority that's been given to the men who are there, or even the women who are there. If Sarah Palin was running for vice president, if she had gotten it, I would honor her. Now, if she had gotten that position, and this is another conversation, that would have been a shame and a curse, but, and it's not a commentary on her character or on her ability, I'm just saying, and that's a different conversation too, but, oh, there's a boy awake. Well, I gotta finish this. Hopefully his mother hears him. Where was I? Man, if he had waited 10 minutes. Let's see. Okay, so there's authority that belongs to a sphere of authority that belongs to the position. So that if I walk into a church, I have to honor the authority that's there. Oh darn, I can't think with him crying. I just have to finish this in a bit.